So we run North Edinburgh Arts, organisation that looks at creativity across the board. I think the interesting thing about the organisation is it's got a purpose-built venue, which is open and accessible. That's kind of in the DNA of the organisation. And it's that the thing that interests me and perhaps my colleagues is the cross-section between cultural excellence and engagement and community in development and support. So it's that kind of Venn diagram bit that makes it incredibly interesting.
Well, what kinds of activities do you do actually? What are the kinds of things that happen at North Edinburgh Arts?
In terms of the regular programme that we'd have sort of outside of a COVID situation, there's a range of regular groups and activities that happen at the centre across art forms and across age groups. So that might be in the studios or the theatre space. There's groups that meet in the cafe area. There's gallery spaces for exhibitions. We've got our play rangers who work with young people in the local parks in outdoor play. And there's a real kind of emphasis, I think, on exactly like Kate said, sort of artist-led activity.
Yeah, I think we've got a real, it's kind of, I was going to say, it's a bit like a punk do-it-yourself ethos at the heart of it.
Yeah.
That my experience has been if you've got inspirational artists and space, then that's really the two ingredients you need to bring together. People will engage, and it's about allowing people to kind of take risks, creative risks, and also cultural risks in a way, in a space where it's allowed.
You know, when one of those projects really works, or when it really bites, what are some of the ingredients to that, do you think?
Oh, I think whenever it really works for me, it's an artist who totally understands people. So I think, I've observed you've got artists who whose practice is about people and with people. So it's not an add-on to their practice, or it's not a kind of a, you're doing things to people. You're doing the whole point of working with other people who are not artists, who wouldn't describe themselves as artists, is that you're getting something else, and their practice is challenged and it grows throughout that. So that's really important. And the other thing is a level of trust between everybody who's in the room. If you've got that trust and you are giving people the ingredients to get creative and do what they want to do, then incredible things can happen.
And what do you think builds that trust?
I think it's an understanding that everybody's bringing something to this mixture. It's not that the artist is leading, they're not teaching as such, but they are genuinely interested in somebody else's perspective. So you're getting that kind of space where people can appreciate and observe what it must be like to be the other person, and that's got to be on a fairly even space. It's not hierarchical. It's got to be as flat a structure as possible.
Absolutely. I think it's not about the artist being put on this pedestal as the person that's the all-knowing element within a group. It's a kind of equal space where the artist is bringing things to the table as much as the community members and participants are. So rather than it being about individuals and a artist that's creating a space and dictating what that looks like.
I wonder if you just thought about kind of play or games, but not necessarily in an online context. Just like in terms of North Ed, in terms of the work that you do outside of that, where do you think? What does that make you think about, or does that have a place? Do you think in what you do?
It absolutely has a place. I mean, I think whenever we've spoken to any of our practitioners, a lot of their practice is about play and about having the permission to be playful and to make mistakes, because that's when you get that kind of creative spark. So I'm thinking about Alice Betts in particular. She's been working with us for a long time, and she's been working with people who, are well-known, well-kent faces in our building, but they've always thought, oh, well, that's for my kids. That's where creativity happens. That's where play happens. That's where children do that. But then whenever you build a relationship with them and give them the space to be playful themselves, something totally new opens up. I think it's a really risky place for them to be in, but if you get it right, then it's really a mind-expanding experience. But you've got to be really careful about how you put it together, because people feel, they're taking a massive risk coming into a room and being playful. That's just not, it's not an easy ask for people.
Yeah, it's almost having the permission to be playful. I think it's one of those things that at a certain age gets cut off a little bit. And I think, yeah, you're totally right. There's a vulnerability to being a bit messy and not having too much kind of fixed outcome or fixed structure within that.
What's your like first response, or what's your first reaction to online games, either personally or through NEA?
Absolute bafflement, and it's like a whole different thing going on somewhere else that I've got no engagement with whatsoever. But whenever I think about it a bit, there's two things that come to my mind. One is I spent quite a lot of my teenage years in arcades because I'm that old. So Galaxian and that kind of stuff, or Space Invaders, brilliant. And then there was the gaming exhibition in the National Museums of Scotland about 3 years ago. And it had all those historical gaming things, so everybody was reliving their misspent teenage years. But also they really challenged what a game meant. So they had stuff, the Fruit Ninja stuff, big, and dance games and stuff like that. And I think that's when people went, oh, right, I see, right. And they were really challenging how games could be. But if I just think about them off the top of my head, I think that's something that boys do sitting in their rooms quietly, and I don't understand it at all.
And why? I would just wonder why. What do you think puts it in that space for you?
I think it's so I'm thinking about mainstream games. It's that there's a huge amount of violence and destruction in them, and I just think I'm not really interested in that.
I think though I think about it as like a mainstream thing, but there is a lot of like creativity within a gaming world. There's a lot of storytelling and visuals and imagery, and you're having to kind of, I suppose it's like those turn the page to pick a route in an adventure book or whatever, the ones where you had to follow the cave or go down the path, but they are inherently creative things that creative people have had to come up with. So there's like a lot of beauty in them, I suppose. And the fact that there's games that are being developed into film now, I suppose that people are seeing that there's enough of a basis, there's enough of a content or a foundation there to build, like take that world and put it into film or live action. Kind of boggling to me, because it was very pixelated when I used to play it. It wasn't as glamorous as it is now, I think.
I was just going to say that, obviously I'm just lazily thinking about stereotypes, and it's that kind of curtain of stereotype that stops me getting into the much more interesting aspects of it.
Since COVID and being online so much at the moment, have you played around much with online stuff with North Edinburgh Arts, or has it been still mainly offline? Or
yeah, I think previous to COVID, we were very analog in that it was all about people coming into the building and working together. So digitally, we were just not there. But Genevieve has done incredible work over the last while to kind of blend it together.
I think it's still very, like, to me, it feels like not rudimentary, but I feel like it's still a very light touch in terms of how we're working online. But I think that that's a reflection of our community and maybe the sense that we're getting of how people want to engage. So we've been using it, I suppose, more from a putting resources, making resources readily available for people at home, and as a kind of virtual meeting space. But I think that the potential for what you can do is massive. I think it has to be right for the community and accessible and all of those things that you need to consider. It's also about, I think, there's a real kind of digital fatigue, and so I think anything that can allow people feel refreshing online at the moment is a really big plus. You see people using platforms like this, but in a really playful way, and sort of taking things that have been set up for more of a corporate framework, like the whiteboard or presentation settings, and actually using those to be playful and creative and engage, and sort of going against what they were designed for. And I suppose I'm wondering, at what point is someone going to come up with a space that's like intended for artists to use in that way? rather like, because I suppose the reason that creativity is coming out of it is it's that kind of punk element that Kate was talking about, like people actually going, well, you've set that up for that, but actually we need a space and we don't have one, so we're just going to use that, but we're going to completely manipulate what it does and its functionality.
It's kind of interesting because suddenly the kinds of conversations we're having about online work are weirdly simply you're still talking about how to make connections, really make meaningful connections, or make meaningful work, or how do you get people really stimulated and connecting and feeling like a group, or all of that stuff, which is very similar to this conversations outside, but suddenly it's all online. And sort of that's why I've got so interested in these games, because actually there's a whole world of games who've been talking exactly the same language, but I've never gone there, and for the same reasons that you guys have said, really. And so I think I guess I'm thinking like it's about where do those things come together is quite interesting. In terms of NEA or the work within the kind of local area that you work in, or the people that you work with, I wonder, where do you see a hybrid version forming, or do you see it going back to kind of very much real?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I mean, I think that's interesting, because I think what you're kind of digging into there is actually it's about the connectivity in the play, and the method of doing that could be seen somewhat as irrelevant. So whether it's face to face, outside, digital, or whatever, that's not the point. The point is bringing people together in a way that suits them. So interestingly, I think, and Genevieve will probably pick up on this as well, we found that some of the people we work with actually respond better to the digital environment because you're in control of your environment. You don't have to be, being in a room with strange people can be very daunting. Again, back to that stuff we picked up on at the very beginning. So there's some people who want to keep doing this. Now, I think the challenge will be, do we run parallel programs that have digital or outside or inside, or do we try and blend them together? So I think we will continue with some form of digital connection, because there's a space for it, there's room for it. But whether we try and blend in-person and online stuff, I think that's all up for grabs, really.
Yeah, I agree with what Kate's saying. For some of our community members, actually, digital spaces, or even actually, if you're thinking about outdoor space, the change in the dynamic of that you've seen the reflection of behaviours, in some of the kids that were taking part pre-COVID, pre-lockdown, that then came back in, and their entry point was, rather than being in a studio space, they were in the garden. That it was something about that as a space for them completely changed their interaction with other people, how they were behaving, their curiosity. Like it was a real game changer in terms of like how the artists, I suppose, how we thought that might go. And then I think from the other point of view, in terms of digital spaces, it allowed members of the community who might miss weeks because of chronic illness, for example, or their family commitments or whatever that was. It actually allowed them to really carve out that time for themselves, because they didn't have to come into a building, they could be in their own home. And so we saw like real regular attendance by people who we might have gaps, in our engagement with. I think really it's each different kind of space has got its own challenges, but in a nutshell, it's all the same good stuff. The good content in the middle is all the same. It's just the shell looks a bit different.
What would be useful for NEA or for you to explore some of that crossover, I guess?
It's kind of, for me, I suppose, like knowing what tools are like what's in your toolbox. So like, I suppose once you know the potential of something, you can see how that might work. So I suppose if you're going in blind, you only know what you know, right? So you only know this is what I could do, but actually there's probably a whole load of other potentials or ways of using softwares or using gaming or digital spaces like to our advantage in a way that would work really well for what North Edinburgh Arts does.
I think so, because I'm thinking one of the strengths of our organisation is our hybridity, in that we, we're really welcoming of different disciplines and people who know better, and we're one of the joys of going to work is saying, I don't know what, you tell me. So I think I would say, in terms of the digital space, Tinderbox has been absolutely key to that, because you've introduced us to Lucy and Jan Sesnick and his work, and I just don't think I would have found that on our own. So I think using Tinderbox in your nascent and developing skills in this, we just want to be on your coattails for a while. And I don't see us as leaders in this, but I see us as offering the kind of why not and the space.
And also, I think in some ways, a lot of community members are probably quite well versed in this, you know, like more so than we are. These entry points to like the arts are really interesting, and I think sometimes there's things that like what people would consider to be more mainstream, like radio or gaming. They don't think that they're absorbing, like they're engaging with the arts when they're listening to a radio or they're gaming at home, but actually the amount of artists that are involved in that process. And actually, I don't know, I think if you take it this sort of highbrow, lowbrow cultural thing, actually it's all arts. And so if there's a medium that is this entry point that's allowing someone to engage with the arts, then like what are they doing? Let's find out about it, because it's, you know, I'm all for it.